Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers update tonight, the 31st of January 2014. And we are happy to say that Travis and myself, the OCC Queensland crew, are back in Townsville today. After witnessing what was a fairly unremarkable tropical cyclone Dylan, Category 2 on landfall, made landfall just to the southeast of Bowen and around the place called Hideaway Bay, we can see there, and it made landfall approximately 3:30 in the morning. We got the eye just a couple of minutes later, about 3:45. We recorded our lowest pressure of 979.6 hectopascals, so it joins the illustrious cyclones that we've chased with a sub 980 reading. There has been 3 of those with sub 980 readings so far. So this one becomes number 4 in the last 5 years. So, folks, really, it was a very unremarkable system. As it crossed the coast, there were some gales. There was a little bit of damage reported at Dingo Beach, and also there was a little bit of damage at Hideaway Bay, exactly where it crossed. But aerial surveys conducted today probably show that it was maybe a marginal Category 1 type tropical cyclone. It was not a Category 2 intensity at landfall, despite what the pressure readings suggested. However, that will remain for the Bureau to make public, or whether they're going to continue with the Cat 2, that's up to them. That's not our call, but we can tell you that on the ground it certainly wasn't a Cat 2. What we can say, though, is that it is causing some very nice rain, a lot further south than we expected it to. So how good's this? We got Claremont 30 millimetres, Emerald 17. So we got a lot of rain there yesterday, and then we've got continuation or some follow-up falls today in the entire region as well, getting as far south even as some of the falls being reported around the Bundaberg, even Hervey Bay getting a little bit of rain from this. So it's gone a lot further south than it was initially predicted to. So that brings in a lot of rainfall over the central western parts of Queensland. Look, that's not drought-breaking stuff, but they're going to need some follow-up rain, and we're not quite sure if they're going to get it. There is going to be another low in the Coral Sea, and it is going to push in a westerly direction eventually, according to some of the guidance, but it also looks like it's going to weaken quite significantly due to vertical wind shear. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. One thing I would like you to note is a little spinning low pressure system around the Willis Island area that just spun up on the monsoon trough today. This is one of those little monsoonal eddies that tend to form, and you can see it here tracking southeast really fast on the Willis Island radar, and nothing to be concerned about. If we shift our focus further to the west and north, we see that the top end of the territory are really copping a battering with a very strong monsoonal trough here at the moment, and we're also seeing that monsoonal activity extending eastwards to the northeastern parts of the territory and also hammering into the western parts of the peninsula. So while our focus has been the Queensland systems, our focus needs to now shift to WA and NT. There is a tropical low expected to form here, or has already formed here, and will push very quickly to the east, possibly reform in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and then is at the longer term predictions expected to start moving back to the west. So that's the current thinking at the moment according to guidance. But firstly, we need to watch this low for the potential, just a low to moderate potential of it developing into a tropical cyclone as it approaches the Kimberley coastline over the next 2 to 3 days, and then obviously in the longer term we'll need to watch its potential over the Gulf, and then back as it crosses back out here to the west we may need to watch it again, believe it or not. So it might be a fairly long-lived tropical low, maybe even making it to cyclone intensity at some point during its life cycle. Today's update from the Bureau of Meteorology is a one that looks at the monsoon trough lying offshore from the North Pilbara extending eastwards over the northern Kimberley. A low is likely to form in the Browse Basin, so that's around the Timor Sea region on Friday. The low will slowly develop in the Browse Basin during Saturday. The models generally agree on the system being steered by the monsoon, so that means it's going to be steered to the east towards the North Kimberley coast on Sunday, Monday. There is a moderate chance that the system could develop into a tropical cyclone by the end of Sunday or Monday, and then it crosses the coast around the North Kimberley or the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf region, and then pushes inland into Northern Territory. So if we take a look at a model animation according to the Access regional model from the Bureau of Meteorology, we see the low here, although the Bureau of Meteorology model does not progress this low further to the east. It sort of just has it sitting here and just gradually not doing much until about day 3, where it starts to show some development out here off the North Pilbara coastline. Over the Timor Sea, we see that the model really doesn't pick this up. All it does is pick up a really strong monsoonal surge, pushes it into the Gulf of Carpentaria, develops a tropical low here in the southeastern Gulf, pushes it over northern inland Queensland. So that's a little bit of a different type model perspective to what I think the Bureau is thinking is going to happen. I guess the important thing to note here is that being such a strong monsoon, you can see as it heads towards even around the western top end around Darwin, we're looking at a monsoon of 25 to 35 knots. So we're looking at a fairly strong monsoon, and even as it heads towards the southeastern Gulf of Carpentaria, still looking at that strong wind warning type monsoonal flow. So the thing to note in that situation is, of course, that the systems can be very, very unpredictable as to what actually forms out here. So over the Coral Sea, we actually start to see the animation, at the start of the animation, that low that pushes off Willis Island, and we see that another low forms out here in the far eastern Coral Sea, and that low starts to deepen and develop by day 3. So we can see that there's a number of different features out here on the monsoon trough. So you can see firstly that low at the start of the animation that ends up making landfall somewhere around the St. Lawrence region according to this model, and then we have a convergent northeast-southeast surge pushing up the coast and creating a lot of rainfall on the central and northern coastlines on Saturday, Sunday and Monday. So you can see the system makes landfall in about 24 hours early tomorrow, and then following that, this surge of easterly winds just pushes up the coast. Just ahead of that surge is some very heavy rainfall, and so don't be surprised if you're on the central and northern parts of Queensland, you're going to see some very heavy rainfall over the next day to 2 days as this system pushes northwards to around about Townsville to Ingham area, and then it sort of stalls in the Cairns area for most of next week. So don't be surprised if you see some fairly heavy rain around the North Tropical Coast as well, even without a tropical low forming in the Gulf, even without the tropical low out here in the eastern Coral Sea. This surge pushes up the coast and stalls around that Cairns region. So we'll take a look at some different model guidance right now, some coarse model guidance, and then we'll have a look at a little bit more detailed model guidance on the northern Kimberley coastline tropical low. Now I've shown you the Access R model, which is the Bureau's model. Now that's not exactly the most accurate model, it's around about mid-range. However, this is the GFS model, and the GFS model does push that tropical low that develops out here eastwards and pushes it basically over the far northern Kimberley into the JBG, and then through the central parts of the Northern Territory and into the southern Gulf country, and then pushes it in a southerly direction. Now that's all happening over the next 5 days. Now be aware, in that situation you're going to see some pretty big rainfalls anywhere around the system and to the north of the system, and then as you head into Queensland, around the system and to the east of the system on feeder bands. So you've got a potential good rainfall situation here across the north again with this tropical low coming eastwards. They don't often get caught on such a strong monsoon and push eastwards as far, because the monsoon is normally not this strong, but it is just raging at the moment, and so this is why a lot of the forecast models take it and do something very similar with it. So that's the GFS. Now the UK Met over the next 5 days is a lot more reserved about what it does with it. It pushes it in an easterly direction, crosses the North Kimberley coastline, and then sort of just drops it into the Northern Territory and just leaves it there and washes it out. And so we have just generalised very heavy rainfall across the Northern Territory and heading into inland parts around the desert regions of the Northern Territory. So we have just a general easterly movement, once again crossing the North Kimberley into the JBG, or at the base of the JBG, and then into the NT region. The FIM9 model, which is an experimental model using the same physics set as the GFS model, obviously comes up with a very similar track and direction of the low, but it also has a much higher resolution than the GFS model, so it's more likely to be accurate, even though it sometimes uses a physics model that probably doesn't quite accurately reflect development potential. But here we see a very similar track to the GFS, where it pushes it eastwards, far northern parts of the Kimberley, JBG, Northern Territory, Gulf. Over the 5-day period, the NavGem model is nowhere near interested in this system, so it just basically pushes it eastwards, pushes some type of depression eastwards, but doesn't recognize it as a closed surface low. But you can see here over the top end, over all of Northern Territory really, and then also over most of northern Queensland, the NavGem model has a hell of a lot of rain falling over the next 5 days. And last but definitely not least, number one model in the world, the Euro. And the Euro has a very similar track here, southeast, and then following in, pushing it a little bit more to the east, to even east-northeast, believe it or not, and just touching the northern parts of the Kimberley into the JBG, into the top end, a little closer to the top end coast, which means those falls may not extend as far inland, but they may be heavier along the top end coast if that track happens, and then into the Gulf of Carpentaria. Now, if it gets into the Gulf of Carpentaria as opposed to the Gulf country, then we have a situation where we do need to monitor it for development into a tropical or potential tropical cyclone. Now, this is all happening, this is day 5, so this is day 5 from this morning. So we're talking sort of the Wednesday time frame by the time it's in the Gulf or in the Gulf country. Now, remembering in the Gulf, it's probably going to keep rainfall centralised a little bit more in that area. In the Gulf country, we start to see rainfall spreading across northwestern and northern Queensland and also the eastern parts of the territory. So there is a little bit of importance into exactly where it's located. Another thing to note here is that there has been a tropical low analysed by the Bureau of Meteorology right near the west coast of the top end, 60 kilometres north of Wadair at 9:30 this morning. The low is expected to remain very close to the coast, and then it moves east across the top end and into the Gulf. Now, this is what some of the models may be confusing. They may be mixing this low up with the low that we've just mentioned, which is this other tropical low in the western region, east towards the northwest Kimberley, and then if it takes a more northerly track, could be over the northern region Sunday, Monday, moderate risk of a tropical cyclone affecting the North Kimberley or even the western top end coastline, believe it or not. So it could be a case of where the model guidance is mixing up the two lows, forming them into one low, pushing them both into the Gulf of Carpentaria. And I guess what's throwing this out of whack is the fact that the global models are picking up what I just showed you, that track of the low forming in the Timor Brows, pushing away to the east and then forming in the Gulf. But the Access model, which is the Bureau's model, is showing just a basic monsoonal flow and then a tropical low sort of just sitting off the Kimberley and Pilbara coastline. So once again, there's a little bit of model variation there, and that may be causing the longer term forecast and throwing it into a lot of doubt. Remembering, of course, that in an active monsoon, these things can pop up very quickly. I just showed you at the start of this broadcast that Willis Island little low that developed right around just to the northwest of Willis Island and is moving south at a great rate of knots. So I showed you that those sort of things can happen and they don't get modelled. The models don't pick up on those. So just be aware that we're looking at this into 5-day time frame, but we're looking at it and the monsoon is this strong that it can cause a low to form within 12-18 hours. We've got a recognised low pressure system that the models don't even pick up. Alright, so just be aware of that. So here we go, folks. Tomorrow morning, that low pressure system located well off the, or just off the far northern parts of the Kimberley. As we head to tomorrow night, we see the system tracks in a general easterly direction. Doesn't really form, but it only tracks east very slowly. As we head towards Sunday morning, we see the system continuing to track in an easterly direction. Look at these gales here on the northern end, just showing you just how strong that monsoon is. It's crazy how strong this monsoon has been for so long. Normally we get a very strong monsoon, couple of days, and then it's gone. It sort of weakens out. But this is just a monsoon that's relentless. And here we go, gale force winds hitting in the monsoon. The actual system is a low though. It's more of a monsoonal low as opposed to a TC. It hasn't really tightened up. It's a bit like the Queensland system, believe it or not, that we named Dylan. Very similar type system where it's very active to the north, except for Dylan was active to the south. But this one is very active to the north with not much to its south. And as we head towards Monday night, we continue to watch this system track in an easterly direction and heading into the southwestern parts of the territory. As we head to Tuesday morning, we see the system continuing to track, probably accelerating a little bit now and heading eastwards into the NT. We also see that the ECMWF model now forms on Tuesday another low in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Now this low does look like it's got a little bit more tropical cyclone type signature to it. You can see here strong winds to the south, strong winds to the north, but they're right around the system. So folks, that's something we do need to be aware of as we head to Tuesday night. This is the NT low, or the Kimberley low. By Tuesday night, we've got this system here very close to being named a tropical cyclone according to the European model. As we head to Wednesday morning, we see that system starts to push in a more southwest or southerly direction. Fairly slow moving though, so it doesn't move very quickly. We see the NT system here, so we see a very strong monsoon coming through the north here, 25-30 knots, 20 to 25 knots, getting up to 30 knots, right around the Gulf of Carpentaria, northern parts of the territory. And we see that tropical cyclone or tropical low getting very close to land there, and then pushing once again as they have done all season, in a westerly direction in the longer term. As we head to Thursday night, we continue to see that happening, and then as we head to Friday morning, it becomes a bit more slow moving near the southwestern Gulf, but eventually sort of continues to push out here. Alright folks, let's get into the other low that's going to form in the Coral Sea, or that's likely to form in the Coral Sea. You can see Dylan here, very far inland now, so no chance of coming back out on the coast and redeveloping. And as we head to tomorrow morning, we see that little low around Willis Island has drifted very quickly to the south, become a very weak sort of convergent area, and just where that convergence is going on, we're going to see some enhanced rainfall, and that rainfall pushes up to the north as we head to Saturday night. You can see here the convergent band here just coming through. You can see this is where our little low or little convergent trough type system is, right there. Once again, don't be surprised, these things spin up very quickly in a monsoon. Alright, so don't be surprised if we can't give you too much warning on this, or if the bomb, can't give you too much warning on this if it decides to do something crazy. Because in a very strong monsoon and a very strong southeasterly, that vorticity can create low pressure. That's vorticity means spin. That spin can create low pressure very quickly. So just because the model here isn't showing this spinning up into anything too significant, don't be surprised if it does happen. Alright, so that's Saturday night. As we head towards Sunday morning, we see that continuing area of convergence here, but the system weakens out into more of a trough line now, and we see that enhanced area of convergence just around the tropical coast, around the Townsville area on the Sunday morning. And then as we head to Sunday night, we continue to see this pushing up the coast, surging up the coast, getting up to around about even between Cairns and Townsville there by Sunday night, and then we start to see on the far eastern edge, we start to see that area of enhanced spin create another new low out here in the far eastern Coral Sea. So we've got a trough line in through here, and we've got a low pressure system that's developed in there by the Sunday or Monday morning. So folks, it's a very complex situation still, and it always will be when there's a very strong monsoonal flow. We're going to see some gales once again, monsoonal gales. This is a monsoonal system. You can see very similar to Dylan. It's fairly elongated. It's not a tight circulation. It's not a tight low. So we've got very strong winds from the north, strong winds from the south, but not quite wrapping around the middle. So not looking at this becoming a tropical cyclone anytime soon. And then what we have afterwards is, once again, it just becomes a jumbly mess once we go into Monday and Tuesday, because we've got a low here, we've got the possibility of a new low spinning in another enhanced area of spin or vorticity. Up here, we've got this low that we're already watching in the eastern Coral Sea. It really just becomes a messy situation in the Coral Sea. And I guess the good thing with a messy situation like that is that the chances of it spinning up into a tropical cyclone become much more remote when we have a fairly elongated tropical lows located all across the Coral Sea and all across the Gulf. The chances of one of them spinning up is very remote, because they tend to, if you like, they tend to gobble up a lot of the winds that are try to wrap around them. So you can see here we've got winds coming in from here, winds coming in from here, but because we've got a fairly elongated low pressure region, they don't have a chance to wrap around the system. They don't have a chance to wrap around. So for this one here in the western Coral Sea, the winds don't wrap around the eastern periphery. For this one here in the eastern Coral Sea, the winds don't get a chance to wrap around the western periphery, and so we have a situation where we've got just very strong monsoonal lows and a very strong monsoonal trough, but a very small chance of any of those actually forming into cyclones at that point in time. Remember, a strong monsoon trough like this though, folks, anything can happen. We can't look too far ahead. As we head to Tuesday night, we push this system eastwards, and we push this system in a more southerly direction, and then some of the model guidance, or most of the model guidance, starts to push the southern low a little bit further to the west again. But you can see here, once again, once these systems get detached from themselves, or detached from each other, there is a chance of them starting to develop a more centralized low pressure center. And so once that happens, we do start to see the potential of that. You can see here, as Wednesday night occurs, to develop into a tropical cyclone. But the development is quite gradual. It's not just an absolute bang. It goes from nothing to cyclone in a very short space of time. It takes a fair bit of time for them to develop their own circulation, and of tight circulation at that. So by about later next week, we start to see the system drifting back towards the Queensland coast. Now this is where we get the big error margin. Some of the guidance continues it out to New Zealand, some of the guidance pushes it back towards the central Queensland coastline. So by Friday night, we see gales again on the south of the system as it heads back towards the west. Now that's all we're going to go to, because I don't want to show you any sort of landfall stuff as we head into next weekend, because it is just that error ridden, and that much can happen between now and then that this model guidance will be probably void by the time you even get this video. So just be aware that the monsoon is going to be cranking out here. We're going to see lows everywhere. We just don't know if we're going to see recognized low pressure centers, or whether we're going to see just big, broad, troughy type lows over the next week or so out here in the Coral Sea. So there's a lot of variation and variability in the guidance. So let's have a look at rainfall. You can see here the northwestern top end coast is in for a hammering tomorrow with those very, very strong northwest monsoonal winds. We're looking at even falls of 200 to 300 millimeters in parts of this coastline, which is phenomenal rainfall. Now remember, the bomb's also looking at a very, very weak low out here, very close to Wadair. Now if that gets out into a bit of open water, you just never know. Things could happen out there for it, but at this stage that's expected to remain a low close to the coast. We're expecting very heavy rain out here. We're also expecting very heavy rain in the central Queensland coast as that Willis Island low / eddy makes its way towards the coast, and that convergent flow of the northeasterlies and southeasterlies comes together and creates a lot of rain. That rain extending a little bit inland as the remnants of TC Dylan also enhance convergence on the south side of that as well. So looking like a fairly active weather period for central Queensland tomorrow. As we head to Sunday, we continue with this very, very strong monsoon flow. Possibly that low has now pushed inland into the NT. Also, we have that other low around Timor we need to watch as it pushes westwards. We've also got the Gulf of Carpentaria remaining active, the Western Peninsula. We see more rainfall developing around the Herbert Lower Burdekin, but particularly the North Tropical Coast and Tablelands region. We see that rain from the St. Lawrence area starting to push back towards the Mackay area as that surge and that weak little low, or that weak little convergent flow there, pushes northwards, and that's on the Sunday. And then as we go from Sunday to Monday, we have that convergent flow pushing northwards into the Herbert Lower Burdekin and then the North Tropical Coast and Tablelands. We also have the new potential low pressure region developing in the Gulf of Carpentaria, so we see an enhancement of the monsoon over the West Peninsula. We also see more rainfall here associated with that NTWA tropical low, and the northeastern parts of the territory probably just drying out a little bit on the Monday, but still some shower and storm activity there. But over parts of northern Queensland, great news for them, especially parts around this region here, which really missed out, I guess, on TC Dillon and what he had to offer. They're going to see an increase in rainfall on the Monday. As we go to Tuesday, we see that rainfall from the Queensland coastline now being limited to sort of Ingham northwards as those dry southeasterlies come through. Over the top of the peninsula, we see that monsoon is just relentless and just smashing them with rainfall, which is fantastic news. And also the the central parts of the Northern Territory getting hammered with a bit of rain as well. And the North Kimberley coastline once again remaining very active as well. And in the longer term, remember, we're looking at that NTWA low pushing back out to the west, but that's still a long way away. Also, the Coral Sea, longer than this, we're looking at that tropical low possibly starting to push back to the west, but once again, that's a long way away. One of the prettiest pictures we've seen for many years, this one. Have a look at this. This is the next week of rainfall. Really, really, really amazing rainfall over the northern half of the Australian continent. Fantastic to see such a strong monsoon trough. Fantastic to see such widespread 50 to 100 millimetre rainfalls all in this area over the next week. This is just brilliant. Let's just hope it pans out. Let's just hope it goes as planned. Once again, this northwestern region, 400 plus, probably more than half a metre of rain in parts of this region over the next week. Same thing around the Weipa area, and also the northern Coral Sea here, getting into the far northern Queensland coast, looking at 300 to 400 millimetres. Well, that's just amazing rainfall in parts of the continent here, people. Thanks very much for watching tonight, and as I say, the situation is just that dynamic that, you know, if things happen tomorrow morning, we might have an update for you tomorrow morning. I can't tell you, but at this stage, assuming that all this goes to plan over the next 24 hours, we'll have an update for you tomorrow night. But just be aware, the situation can be ever changing. All right, so don't take anything more than about 2 days ahead with anything more than a grain of salt there. It's just amazing monsoon and amazing weather situation all over northern Australia. Good night.